Okay, so it's show and tell time. This time with real artifacts. This is a small portion of what I have. Um, these are all broken points. They're considered, or they're nicknamed brokes, right? They're all from Central Texas, and many of these, I think, are from the same site. And they're deposited in different layers. They're not deposited all at the same time. So there's different time periods in here. Okay, so I won't spend too much time talking in the beginning anyway. I will add some comments as I go, just to show you some of my, or let you know of my observations and such. Okay, so a lot of these are what they call patternalis points, but I won't be naming each one. I just wanted to let you know. Most of these are archaic. In fact, I think they're all archaic points. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Just to give you an idea, this one looks like it's pristine except for, some dings, and those dings can happen in the ground with something called bioturbation, or movement within the ground, or just simply accidental breakages either in the dig during the site excavation, or back in the day uh, it just gets dinged, but it's still usable. Okay, some of these I can comment on whether I think they're heat treated or not, right? uh, I have a bias toward heat treatment. I think most of this stuff is heat treated, at least to some extent, right? You don't need to heat treat it a lot in order to get it to work better. Now, if you heat treat it a lot, you get get the heat pops. These I think are. I got a bunch of heat damage points down here, right? These are probably damaged after the fact. In fact, all of these I think are damaged after the fact. They end up in a fire, either in a fire in a camp, or in a forest fire, brush fire, or some other fire exposure. Some of them may have been cooked with the meat. That is a good explanation for some of these. But I think, large pieces like this, you could find them in meat pretty easily and take them out before you cook the meat. Um, but anyway, and I think some of these may have been napped after heat treatment, and some of the heat flaws left in. But I don't think that's common though. When you're napping, I have seen a few artifacts where they started with a piece of heat treat, they napped it, they found flaws in it because of the heat treatment, but they kept it anyway. I think that's rare. I think most of these heat pops and stuff are after the fact, especially when I can see a potential secondary pop right there. See this little crack right here? That tells me, I think that tells me that that's just not popped out yet, right? And if they were napping this, that flaw would be something that would interfere with the napping, and it looks like it didn't at all, right? Anyway, that's just my take on that one. I think this he popped after it was made. Okay, anyway, it's hard to tell, right, without some sort of laboratory technique, what is heat treated and what is not. And I don't know what that technique is. Okay, so when I say I think something's heat treated, I'm just guessing according to my experiences. But since it's so easy to do, and a lot of this Central Texas stuff, which this is, heats at a very low temperature effectively, I would say most of it is, more than 50% of it is, at least a little bit heat treated. Okay? Another piece of evidence I have for heat treatment is I, I think I have some material that's identical to this, right? This is a real artifact. I think it was made out of this material here. Now, I took this material up to 450 degrees and nothing happened to it. Now, to be fair, not all of it reacts well. This is the same batch. This did break up. This is the same batch. but there's no damage on this one. So it's variable. And I took some chips off this side, off the bulb of percussion side, so I could see if there's any internal damage on the thickest part. I don't see any heat caused internal damage on the thickest part of this spall. So this is pretty safe to nap even after 450 degrees of heat. Now, why is that important? That's important because you can take it up, like this piece here, you could take it up to different temperatures below 450 and it wouldn't show any pops or defects. Right? Or it wouldn't ruin the stone. So this has a large range. I need to check, but I think this particular stone, I've got a bunch of it, right? I think this particular type of stone will also benefit from a low temperature heat treat. It's like 350 or even 300 degrees. All right, so this may have been taken up to 300 degrees to nap it, or it could have been taken anywhere in between 300 to 450 degrees. That's a large range. With that type of large range on a stone, that stone is highly desirable. Why? Because back then they didn't have thermometers. So to have a stone that heat treats with a large range, the chance for success is greater. Okay? So that type of stone, I think, was sought after. And a lot of these pieces seem to be made from that type of stone. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's my take on that. And one of the reasons why I think most of these, or at least partially, or how should I say, at least somewhat heat treated and not brought up to the maximum temperatures that they can stand. Okay, so there's that. Now, I'm going to go through these. I said I wasn't going to talk very much in the beginning, but I guess I did. All right, so I could go and measure each width and thickness to get the ratio. Let's just say this was 40 millimeter. Let's just try to get a quick ratio. 40 by, let's say that's 7 millimeter. Okay, a 7 to 1 would be 49 millimeter. 6 to 1 would be 36 millimeter. So it's between 6 to 1 and 7 to 1 if my math's right. I'm very bad at simple math. So that's pretty thin. That's expert level as far as I'm concerned, 6 to 1. Now, can you do that with raw stone? Yeah, you can. I can do that with raw stone with steel tools. Let's see. I don't know, mine is 6 to 1. This is mine. Let's see. This one is 37 by 6. So 6 to 1. I can get it with, this is raw stone of that type, or a very similar type. And I can get it with steel tools. But if I were to do this with abo, I would probably end up with something like that. Just because it's very difficult to generate a large amount of force on the edges here to send in those flakes. And that's what happens with stuff like this. Now, I can do it with indirect percussion in a lot of cases to thin these raw pieces down. But I usually cannot get it that thin when it's a piece of raw, unless I'm using metal of some sort. And you also get this kind of stuff. Even with a metal tool, when you try to thin down a thin piece, you get step fractures that cannot be removed. I don't see any on this one, right? This is all completely clean. I don't see any major step fractures anywhere. And you get major step fractures with raw stone. You know, they do exist. And this looks raw to me, yeah. And the edges feel different. They feel spiky. Still at this age, this is thousands of years old. At this age, the edges still feel spiky and grippy. And that's the way I tend to judge if something is raw or heat treated. The raw stone edges feel different when you sharpen them than the heat treated edges. It doesn't feel sharper, it feels spiky and grippy. That's how I describe it. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. I think I've shown this one already. I'm not going to measure each one, it'll take forever. These are all different kinds of points. Some of them have been refurbished. Like I think this is probably bigger and it was resharpened during its lifespan and then eventually shot to death. It probably was shot one more time and then the base broke and it was retired. This is impact damage on it. Obvious impact damage. Very little other damage. No damage to the stem or base. Which means, to me, that means it had a lot of glue in there. It wasn't touching the wood, or the wood was soft, so it wouldn't damage this anyway with the impact. With really soft wood. Now, if it's a hard, extremely hard wood, it would chip these. It would snap the glue joint, and it would chip these down here. There's a lot of pieces with damage to these ears. Okay. And I realize it's cherry picking to look through them to find these little breaks, but it's common to see these breaks. And I think it's due to impact, you know, in the haft. When the glue joint breaks and you have contact with the bottom of the notch in the foreshaft. Okay. Anyway, these are all different thicknesses, but for the most part, I would say 5:1 to 6:1. Not all of them are straight. See how this curves? This is this is impact damage. I think both on the ear and the tip. This looks like a piece of raw stone to me. Mainly because I've worked some of this before and it's high quality stuff, so it's easy to flake. And it does have inclusions. This has got some quartzite and stuff. What surprises me is this, even though it has a tip snap, which looks like it broke on impact, although I can't be sure of that, these are not damaged. So that was a good glue joint, or it's a knife and it was just snapped accidentally somehow and not fired at anything. This is how thick I can usually get them with abo tools. And let's see what this is. 30 millimeters by 7. Let's just give it the benefit of the doubt and say 6, right? So that's 5:1 or more. Between 4:1 and 5:1. The thickest part, about 8, right? 8 by 30. Yeah, it's like 4:1. Very close. All right, so gives you an idea. I can get 4:1 with abo pretty easily on raw stone, but if I want to get it thinner, I use heat treated stone. This looks heat treated to me, mainly because of the way it's looking as far as the flaking. See these terminations here? It looks like a heat treat termination. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm an expert in evaluating flakes. It just looks that way to me. If I look at the raw stuff and look at the terminations on the raw, they're usually abrupt, or they still have a remaining material. They're not smooth. Now this is an abrupt termination. So it is similar. It is possible that this could be raw, but I would, if I were to bet, I would say heat treat. At least slightly, or at least a little bit to get it more workable so you could sharpen it more easily. And there is pressure work, it looks like, on the edge. So this is impact damage on here, on these ears. Both of them snapped off, and tip damage. I think that's pretty typical when you're hitting a very solid bone or the ground. No, this is the same thing happens when it hits the ground. So something solid on the ground, or a tree or something. Okay. A little bit thicker. I've worked some of this material too. It works fine raw. So it's probably raw, this one here. Okay. This is impact damage, it looks like to me. But it also looks like secondary exposure to, well, I don't know. The edges feel a little bit rounded off. That's what I'm saying. It may be the bioturbation or just the age of the artifact, but it still feels pristine here, right? A little bit rough on this side, like it was they were trying to resharpen it on this side. But this feels like perhaps the original edge. I don't know. But you can see how a finished edge looks like. Something broken in construction or during the initial stages looks like this, whereas a finished one obviously looks more refined. Okay. And that's impact damage. I think I said that already. Pretty classic looking impact damage from being fired as a projectile. This is a preform, or they did the base first, right? They did the stem first, and then they're working on the blade. Obviously not able to get the flakes they wanted, so I think it was just abandoned and never used. Now, can you use it as some other tool? I'm sure you could, but it's not as good at edge as like this from a natural stone. I mean, not natural, but a spall can give you a better edge than this. So I think this is just discarded. If you wanted a sharp edge, just use something like this. This one whack, and you'll get a piece like this and use the edge for quite some time. Okay. Yeah. Not much to say on some of these, but I'm sure you will enjoy looking at them because they do present clues. This looks like it was damaged in the haft and an impact because both these ears are broken off, and it's got a pretty major break on the blade. The barb is on both of them look like, well, I don't know about that one, but this one is definitely dinged, so could have snapped and moved around in the haft and got very damaged. This one here, probably broken in construction because this looks to me like the outside edge. Like, let's see if I can find one similar. It looks like, this looks like one of these. All right, okay, let me get this. Yeah, like this. This is the side here. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I wouldn't make any judgments on this one, whether it was broken in construction or not. It may have been fully formed and just snapped on impact. This edge looks fairly refined. See, if I don't have an intact one of this style, I don't think. Maybe. The edge is definitely more refined on this one than this one. Although, you know, I've seen intact versions with kind of a crude edge, but I think you can see the difference. This might have been, there's a good chance it was broken in construction because of the intense and bold flaking that you can see on these. So this edge looks finished, right? And this edge does not. Now this edge does not look finished either. This looks like they broke it during construction. The base looks pristine, right? They usually do these stems first on this particular type. Lots of basic flakes, percussion, or well, probably not pressure, but maybe some pressure to clean up some of these spots, like, you know, picking on the edge here to regularize it. Or it could have all been punch work or just brushing with the antler or something. Hard to say. But very cool. When you get one that is broken in construction, you can see what types of flakes that they were removing. These are bold flakes. Okay. And you can see on this one, the finish out is probably with pressure or very light percussion. Nice fluting, or what they call thinning flakes from the base. Nice refined edges. It's hard to say if it started out wide or if that's the way that they made it originally. But I think impact damage on this one too. Yeah, this looks like impact damage to me, especially because of this little what do you call that, Burin type fracture that comes from up here. Nice stone. Some of these, well, most of this stuff is translucent to some extent. Probably should be showing that. Some of it is opaque. That one's kind of opaque. Now, some of them surprise you in how translucent they are. Thickest right here. On most of these paternalis points, it's thickest right here across the neck. And that makes sense. Especially if they're throwing these things. These are big points. If they're throwing the big points, you need some strength right here across the neck, because that's a lot of force. That's a lot of torque with a large point. Okay. Nice. They don't grind these at all. This is all sharp down here. So that tells me there's a lot of glue and the wrapping is thick, so it doesn't cut through. So thick wrapping and lots of glue is what that tells me. When it's really sharp and jagged down here, they're not too concerned about cutting the wrappings or damaging these in the socket or in the notch. This could be socketed into bone. All right, this is narrow enough, I think. Yeah, it's just barely less than 3/4 of an inch. Anything larger than 3/4 of an inch is very difficult to find a large, well, at least with deer bone, a large deer bone that it'll easily fit into. Okay, I'm not even through halfway. It's already 25 minutes. Impact fracture. Little dings on both the barbs. Otherwise, very nice study piece to see the edges. The edge treatment is similar to the other one. They try to scoop it out as much as they can to thin down the edges. Of course, with use, you know, those little delicate areas get chipped off. This stone, I can't find any of it, but this is pretty popular stone, especially if you go into the hill country. Well, let's see, west of Central Texas. There's a lot. I've seen a lot of artifacts in the local museum here made of this type of material, where it's kind of a yellowish, two tones of yellow, a lighter yellow and a darker yellow. And I wish I could find some of this material so I can tell if this is raw or heat treated. It looks like it's a heat treated stone, but this might knap extremely easily in the raw state, so it's hard to tell. And it's a finished piece, just with some impact damage, and that's it. It was retired. They didn't resharpen it or anything. It could have been also impacted on the ground and lost that way. Okay, this one, I can't tell if this is completed or not. To me, it looks like a preform or broken in construction. Although, I don't know, it's possible it could be impact damage. Again, it's hard to tell. But the edge does not look finished to me, so I don't think it was finished out and thrown. I don't think this is impact damage. Again, I'm going by the edge on this as my guide to know if this is finished or not. It's a lot more crude. It's the same type of point, right? Basically, if you can see that it could be a preform for that type. The base is still pretty wide. It's still missing, and I still have a chance to do a thinning flake or flute on this side. They already did that side. They could flip it over, widen that notch out, and take another thinning flake. Just like this one has two thinning flakes. Right? Okay. This one here, I have worked some of this stone raw, and it does work nicely in a raw state. But again, that's what happens. You get thick points in the raw state usually. So I would say this is raw. Impact damage. This edge looks finished down here. So it was probably thrown and broken. This one is a reworked point. I got a few reworked in here. There's not many. With such pointed ears down here, I would say that it was a knife and not subject to a lot of impact. And why would they put large ears on there? It's just a better glue grip. That reminds me of a tooth. So you put this into a notch or a socket, they're imitating the way the tooth roots or teeth roots are. That's my theory anyway. It holds well with that type of arrangement, right? As long as there's a lot of glue. Okay, it's 30 minutes. I'm going to continue on the next one.